very welcome indeed. My name is Edward Madigan. I'm a historian of the First World War based at Royal Holloway, University of London. And I'm really thrilled to see such a good turnout for what promises to be a very special performance. The performance we're about to witness is the culmination of a two-day conference during which historians and members of community groups have come together to explore the tragic but compelling theme of maternal bereavement during the First World War. Now, the First World War was, of course, a conflict of unprecedented violence and destruction. Approximately 10 million servicemen from across Europe and the wider world died during the years of the war. Some 750,000 British and Irish men were killed as a result of military service between 1914 and 1918. If we consider the entire British Empire, that figure rises to about 1.1 million. Now, those figures are terrible enough, but the numbers of war deaths suffered by some of Britain's allies and adversaries were far greater. 1.5 million French servicemen were killed or mortally wounded. Almost 2.5 million German servicemen were killed or mortally wounded. Now, these are just numbers, statistics. So unlike a poem or a painting or a photograph, they don't really give us any idea of the human experience of the war. But I do think they give us a very stark impression of the vast scale of the conflict. War, first and foremost, is a military endeavour, and the essence of that endeavour is killing. Between 1914 and 1918, killing took place on a vast, industrialised scale. In the years after the armistice of November 1918, a commemorative culture emerged in Britain and elsewhere that focused more or less exclusively on the dead. This emphasis on the sacrifice of those who died as a result of military service made sense in the 1920s and 30s, when millions of people across the globe were still in mourning and desperately trying to come to terms with their grief. And we should remember that whatever we feel about the cause for which they were fighting, the dead made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave everything they had. In our own time, the dead serve as a reminder of the true nature of war and the extraordinary human cost of war. As the great theologian and philosopher Albert Schweitzer famously said, soldiers' graves are the greatest preachers of peace. Yet a commemorative culture that focuses exclusively on the dead arguably overlooks the vast majority of people who were affected by the great violence of the First World War. So the millions of servicemen who technically survived the conflict, but were psychologically traumatized or physically disabled as a result of their experiences, have little place in the commemorative culture of 21st century Britain. And when we come together to formally remember the dead today, those who suffered profound bereavement as a result of the war are usually forgotten. As the First World War was unquestionably a moment of extraordinary bereavement in European and world history, this marginalisation of the bereaved is, I feel, regrettable. Death, even the premature, tragic death of young people, is not unique to wartime. But the nature of death during the First World War was highly distinctive, and grief was often especially difficult for those in mourning to come to terms with. This was partly due to the sheer number of war dead, but also because many of the rituals that help people cope with bereavement in peacetime were taken away during the war year. Those who lost loved ones at the front rarely knew exactly how their son or brother or husband had died. What they did know was that he was likely to have met a violent and possibly painful end. Most families in mourning were also denied the consoling ritual funeral, and if their loved one was buried overseas, as was usually the case, bereaved relatives had no grave visit to attend. As the majority of those who lost their lives during the war were young, unmarried men, the impact of their deaths on their mothers was often devastating. And yet the wartime demand for citizens to act patriotically and the need to maintain morale on the home fronts meant that women were often expected to be stoic and even proud in their grief. So while mourning mothers were actively involved in shaping the commemorative culture that emerged in Britain and elsewhere after the war, they had to come to terms with their losses in private. And the pain of bereavement often stayed with these women for the rest of their lives. So this evening we've come together not to discuss or to analyse the experience of mourning mothers, but simply to remember them and to reflect upon their grief. In order to help us to do this, Claire Connors will perform a new, specially composed piece of music inspired by the theme of maternal bereavement during the First World War. Claire is an award-winning British composer based here in London. She's written commissions for London Arts, Women in Music, and the Performing Rights Society Foundation, as well as composing critically acclaimed albums for the Ballinascu Quartet. Throughout her career, she's collaborated with a really extraordinary range of artists, including David Byrne, Kraftwerk, and Spiritualized. The title of the specially commissioned piece, which you will perform for us here for the first time this evening, is Peppermints and Guns. Claire's violin will be accompanied by excerpts from the letters of Wilfred and Susan Owen, read by the award-winning poet, jazz singer, and director, Justina Kahinde. And Justina will be performing the role of Susan Owen, reading her son's letters as she receives them from the front. Now in Britain, of course, Wilfred Owen is probably the best known poet of the First World War. And I think he's regarded by many as one of the most authentic voices of the conflict. The poems he composed during the war years, including Dulce et Decorum Est, Anthem for Doomed Youth, and Disabled, have become iconic. And almost a century after his death, there can be hardly a schoolboy or girl in the UK today who isn't familiar with his work. Wilfred was a rather self-conscious, introverted young man who overcame an initial reluctance to serve and joined up in October 1915. He originally enlisted with the Artists' Rifles, but by the summer of 1916, he'd been granted a commission as a second lieutenant with the Manchester Regiment. His battalion was deployed to the Western Front just after Christmas of that year, and he led his men into the trenches for the first time in February 1917. Over the following number of months, he saw extensive service in the front line, and at the beginning of May, he was sent to Craig Lockhart Hospital in Scotland to be treated for neurasthenia, or shell shock. While at Craig Lockhart, he met Siegfried Sassoon, a more confident, much more well-established poet who had a great influence on his work. After more than a year away from the battlefield, he returned to the Western Front in September 1918. He soon distinguished himself in the heavy fighting of the final Allied offensive of the war, and was awarded the Military Cross for gallantry under fire at the beginning of October. On the 4th of November, just a week before the end of the war, he was killed while attempting to lead his men across the Somme-Oise Canal in northern France. His mother Susan received a telegram informing her of his death on 11th of November 1918, the day of the war. Today, Wilfred Owen is a towering figure of the First World War, an iconic English poet. So when he died in France, he was really just another mother's son, one among millions of the fathers. So please join me now in welcoming Claire and Justina to the stage.
was asked to write some music, which is a great honour, but also such a difficult area to explore. I wanted to find the best way for me as a sort of entry point to the project, so I thought I'd write a letter to my son. And then when I'd started writing, we visited my mum, and I asked her, because I felt that her side of the family, nobody was directly affected by the First World War, and that was correct. But then I talked to my auntie, who's on my dad's side of the family, and my dad died many years ago now, and I knew that my grandfather, his father, had fought in the war but had actually survived the war, and then really made a big effort to make sure that he didn't fight in the Second World War. But what I discovered from my auntie is that my great uncle, and the brother-in-law that my grandfather never met, went to the same war but was killed in Ypres. So this first letter is to him. So it's Dear Oswald. This next one's called Harrison. cigarettes.
January 1917. My own dear mother. I have joined the regiment, who are just at the end of 6 weeks' rest. I will not describe the awful vicissitudes of the journey here. I arrived at Folkestone and put up at the best hotel. It was a place of luxury, inconceivable now. Carpets as deep as the mud here, golden flunkies, pages who must have been melted into their clothes and expanded since. Even the porters had clean hands. Even the dogs that licked up the crumbs in clean teeth. Since I set foot on Calais quays, I've not had dry feet. At the base, as I said, it was not so bad. After those 2 days, we were let down, gently, into the real thing, mud. It has penetrated now to that sanctuary, my sleeping bag, and that holy of holies, my pyjamas. For I sleep on a stone floor, and the servant squashed mud on all my belongings, I suppose by way of baptism. We have 3 officers in this room. The rest of the house is occupied by servants and the band, the roughest set of knaves I have ever been herded with. Even now, their vile language is shaking the flimsy door between the rooms. Everything is makeshift. The English seem to have fallen into the French unhappy-go-lucky nom system. There are scarcely any houses here. The men lie in barns. Our mess room is also an ante and an orderly room. We eat and drink out of old tins, some of which show traces of ancient enamel. We are never dry and never off duty. On all the officers' faces, there is a harassed look that I've never seen before, and which in England never will be seen out of jails. The men are just as bare as father as them, expressionless lumps. We feel the weight of them hanging on us. I censored hundreds of letters yesterday, and the hope of peace was in every one. The Daily Map, which appeared about January the 2nd, will be of extreme interest to you. We were stranded in a certain town one night, and I saved the party of us by collaring an orderly in the streets and making him take us to a sergeant's mess. We were famishing, and a mother beer did me more good than any meal I ever munched. The place was like a bit of blighty, all hung with English greetings and mistletoe. I scarcely know any of the officers. The senior are old regulars, the younger are several artists. In my room is an artist of the same school as I passed. He is also a fine watercolour sketcher. I may have time to write again tomorrow. I have not, of course, had anything from you. I am perfectly well and strong, but unthinkably dirty and squalid. It's scarcely there to wash. Pass on as much of this happy news as may interest people. The favourite song of the men is "The roses round the door makes me love mother more." They sing this everlastingly. I don't disagree. Your very own W.E.O. Tuesday the 16th of January 1917. My own sweet mother. I'm sorry you've had about 5 days letterless. I hope you had my 2 letters posted since you wrote your last, which I received tonight. I am latterly disappointed that I never got one of yours. I can see no excuse for deceiving you about these last 4 days. I have suffered 7th hell. I have not been at the front. I have been in front of it. I held an advance post, that is a dugout, in the middle of no man's land. We had a march of 3 miles over shelled road, then nearly 3 along a flooded trench. After that, we came to where the trenches had blown flat out and had to go over the top. It was, of course, dark, too dark, and the ground was not mud, not sloppy mud, but an octopus of sucking clay, 3, 4, and 5 feet deep, relieved only by craters full of water. Men had been known to drown in them. Many stuck in the mud only got on by leaving their waders' equipment and in some cases their clothes. 3/4 dead. I mean, each of us 3/4 dead. We reached the dugout and relieved the wretches therein. My dugout held 25 men tight-packed. Water filled it to a depth of 1 or 2 feet, leaving, say, 4 feet of air. One entrance had been blown in and blocked. So far, the other remained. The Germans knew we were staying there and decided we shouldn't. Those 50 hours were the agony of my happy life. Every 10 minutes on Sunday afternoon seemed an hour. I nearly broke down and let myself drown in the water that was now slowly raising over my knees. Towards 6 o'clock, when I suppose you'd be going to church, the shelling grew less intense and less accurate, so that I was mercifully helped to do my duty and crawl, wade, and climb and flounder over no man's land to visit my other post. It took me half an hour to move about 150 yards. I was chiefly annoyed by our own machine guns from behind. The sing, sing, sing of the bullets reminded me of Mary's canary. On the whole, I can support the canary better. I am now as well, I I suppose, as ever. I allow myself to tell you all these things because I'm never going back to this awful post. It is the worst the Manchesters have ever held, and we are going back for arrest. I hear that the officer who relieved me left his 3 Lewis guns behind when he came out. He only had 24 hours in. He will be court-martialed. In conclusion, I must say that if there is any power whom the soldiery execrate more than another, it is that of our distinguishable countrymen. Your very own Wilfred.
So I did a little bit of research because peppermints were requested for in one of the letters. So I thought, well, let's see what other sweets were around at the time. So there were other mints available, and actually peppermints was apparently Pep-O mint, and that's probably a bit of branding early, isn't it? There were Everton mints, which were black and white stripes, of course from Liverpool, and with toffee in the middle. But there was a special sweet invented for the First World War, and it was called a peace baby. Anyway, we know them now as jelly babies. They were revived in the 1950s. So this is called peace babies. This is fondest love. And the last one of this set is chatter and patter. The ladies' mums chattering, of course. But I read on the Imperial War Museum website about somebody describing the experience of the trenches and how there were long periods of time where actually there was nothing happening at all. And so they had to sort of occupy themselves, and so they were, a little bit of gambling went on, and a lot of patter. Banter to us now, I guess, but so chatter and patter.
April 1917. My own dearest mother, we are in rest. I arrived at the battalion a day too late for the stunt. I am therefore not in the we when I say we captured 6 guns, numerous machine guns, and of course the position. But I am still me. We stuck to our line, 4 days and 4 nights without relief in the open and in the snow. Not an hour passed without a shell amongst us. I never went off to sleep for those days, because the others were far more fagged after several days of fighting than I. We lay in wet snow. I kept alive on brandy, the fear of death and the glorious prospect of the cathedral just below us, glittering with the morning. With glasses, I can easily make out the general architecture of the cathedral. So I've told you now where we have got. I found your parcel waiting for me here when we got in at 3 in the morning, all half dead with fatigue and some quite poor lads. It was like a look-in at home, to burrow into that lovely big box and examine all the loving presents. I opened it in bed, for I found my blankets ready laid out in this cosy cellar, and before I'd opened all the boxes, fell fast asleep. I am not awake now properly, and my letter may appear disjointed, but then I'm not disjointed. I learned with astonishment that you had had measles, and selfishly speaking, I'm glad enough I only know now you are better of it. Oh, darling mother, you can't think how you can secure my peace of mind by being able to tell me you are well. Look at me. I am nearly screwed to death with cold and nerves one night. 2 days later, I am in perfect, glowing, brilliant health. Tell Mary that Captain Christian Green is immensely complimentary about the gingerbread. I will write again tomorrow. Just had yours of 27th found man, 31st waiting for me. Be sure we shall not go into action again for a long time. It couldn't be done. Still always, and even your very own, Wilfred. Second of May, 1917. Dearest mother, here again. The doctor suddenly was moved to forbid me to go into action next time the battalion go, which will be in a day or 2. I did not go sick or anything, but he is nervous about my nerves and sent me down yesterday labelled neurasthenia. This will mean that I shall stay here and miss the next action tour or front line. Or even it may be employed for a more considerable time on base duty or something of the sort. Do not for a moment suppose I have had a breakdown. I am simply avoiding one. At the first ambulance I arrived at in the car, a corporal came up to me with a stained air of sleepy dignity that seemed somehow familiar. And when he began to enter in a notebook my name and age, we knew each other. It was all heart of the technical. Bystanding Tommies were astounded at our fraternity. For the good old sort brought back in an instant all the days of study in Shrewsbury and the years that were better than these, or any years to come. Although married, as you may know, to one of the girls who acted with me at the socials, he has not grown up any more since the last time at the PTC. He was reading the same old books that we did there. I was jolly glad to see him again and to borrow, for he has nothing particular to do but read on his present job of pack store corporal in the RAMC. I'm so glad you got the one field card, which I was able to work down from there. Your last parcel has arrived, and I enjoyed the munching right well. I had some compensation for lost parcels, and being given a parcel sent to an officer who was wounded the first day he joined us. It is a regimental custom never to send foodstuffs back after officers who go down to hospital. I shall soon want some more players. Nothing else yet. I am more glad than I dare say to know that dear Mary is now all right. I tried to imagine that you were really well. How strange the fact that I am in hospital means that all came of uneasiness about me is removed from you. Do not hawk this letter about. Nay, I would rather you told no one I am called casual again. Your very own Wilfred. (18th of February, 1918). My dear, dear mother. Yours was the letter among 5 others. I will send you Mrs. Gray's, for so you will learn much about her and about myself. I am sorry you have disturbing and daylight lingering dreams. It is possible to avoid them by proper thinking before sleep. I confess, I bring on what few war dreams I now have entirely by willingly considering war of an evening. I do so because I have my duty to perform towards war. You know with what feelings I think of you, well or unwell. They are such, when I hear you are at least bettering, as make me a better creature, and my dreams younger. So must you think of me, and Harold, and Colin. There is a point where prayer is indistinguishable from blasphemy. There is also a point where blasphemy is indistinguishable from prayer. of October, 1980. My darling mother. As you must have known, both by my silence and from the newspapers which mention this division, and perhaps by other means of censors, I have been in action for some days. I can find no word to qualify my experience except the word sheer. Curiously enough, I find the pages talk about sheer fighting. It passed the limits of my abhorrence. I lost all my earthly faculties and fought like an angel. If I started into details of our engagement, I should disturb the censor and my own rest. This corporal who stuck to me and shadowed me like your prayers, I captured a German machine gun and scores of prisoners. I'll tell you exactly how another time. I only shot one man with my revolver at about 30 yards. The rest I took with a smile. The same thing happened with the other parties all along the line we entered. I have been recommended for the Military Cross and have recommended every single NCO who was with me. My nerves are in perfect order. I came out in order to help these boys, directly by leading them as well as an officer can. Indirectly, by watching their sufferings, that I may speak of them as well as a pleader can. I have done the first. Of whose blood lies yet crimson on my shoulder where his head was, and where so lately yours was. I must not now write. It is all over for a long time. We are marching steadily back. Moreover, the war is nearing an end. Still, Wilfred, and more than Wilfred. Thursday the 31st of October, 1980. Dearest Mother, I will call the place from which I'm now writing the smoky cellar of the forester's house. I write on the first sheet of the writing pad which came in the parcel yesterday. Luckily the parcel was small, as it reached me just before we moved off to the line. Thus, only the paraffin was unwelcome in my pack. My servant and I ate the chocolate in the cold middle of last night, crouched under a draughty tambour, roofed with planks. I husband the malted milk for tonight and tomorrow night. The handkerchief and socks are most opportune, as the ground is marshy and I have a slight cold. It is a great life. I am more oblivious than, alas, yourself, dear mother, of the glassy glimmering of the guns outside and the hollow crashing of the shells. There is no danger down here, or if any, it will be well over before you read these lines. I hope you are as warm as I am, as serene in your room as I am here, and that you think of me never in bed, as resignedly as I think of you always in bed. Of this I am certain, you could not be visited by a band of friends half so fine as surround me here. Ever, Wilfred. August 1st, 1920. It is nearly 2 years ago since my dear eldest son went out to the war for the last time. And the day he said goodbye to me, we were looking together across the sun-glorified sea, looking towards France with breaking hearts, when he, my poet son, said to me those wonderful words of yours, beginning at, "When I go from hence, let this be my parting word." And when his pocket book came back to me, I find these words written in his dear writing, with your name beneath. Would it be asking too much of you to tell me what book I should find the whole poem in? My precious boy was killed 1 week before the awful fighting was over. The news came to us on Armistice Day. A small book of my son's war poems will be published very soon. His heart was torn with sorrow at the suffering he saw, and the callousness of the majority at home, the futility of war. He speaks not of his own suffering, but anyone who loved him can tell from his poems what he has passed through to be able to write as he did. He was only 25. Wilfred loved all that was beautiful. His life was beautiful and of great influence for good. I should like you to read my son's little book, if you would do us the honour. If I may, I should be proud to send you a copy. With great respect and admiration. From the mother of Wilfred Owen, Susan Owen.
This is called Cherish. love, loss and resilience.
To say how much, I think I can speak for all of us, how moving and beautiful tonight's performance was. Thank you so much. Justina Gahindi, our actress, did a beautiful job of playing Susan Owen, and Claire Connors, composer and performer. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Just a few other thank yous to say tonight after this wonderful performance to, of course, Royal Holloway's Centre for Public History and Evan Madigan, to Matthew Shaw and the Institute for Historical Research. At the Big Ideas team, I have to single out Sarah Giles. Where are you, Sarah? Sarah, stand up. Thank you so much. You put so much into for putting in so much to the this wonderful, amazing 2 days that we've had here. I can't take my Yoruba mother's t-shirt off because it's an example of so many community groups, wonderful, amazing academic work. It's been brilliant. This is midpoint in the project, so we carry on exploring motherhood and loss, and if you would like to get involved, please grab hold of any of us or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. There's both community engagement that you can take part in all sorts of ways, but also we're take a postcard because we're hoping to put up some playground memorials, so to actually commemorate the experience of mothers with playground equipment as a joyful way of remembering them and contributing some pleasure to people's lives today. So do take a postcard. Thank you again for coming, and